For section 16.4, we are solving x squared plus bx plus c equals 0 by completing the square. So I want you to notice there's no a value in these questions. So what does completing the square mean? That means that we are finding the value of c needed to make an expression into a perfect square trinomial. So what that does is it makes it faster to solve and a little bit easier. And we complete the square by adding b over 2 squared to both sides. And if you look up here in the top, b is the number, the coefficient that's in front of our x value. So example 1 says to complete the square to perform a perfect square trinomial, then factor the trinomial. So what I want to do is figure out what b over 2 squared is. b in this case is 12. So 12 divided by 2 is 6, and then I have to square that. 6 squared is 36. So then I have to add 36 in there for that c. So I have x squared plus 12x plus 36. Now I can use the perfect square trinomial shortcut and find the square root of the front and the last term. To double check, one from the front, one from the back times 2 gives us that middle term. So factored, this would be x plus 6, because it's all addition in this problem here, squared. So that means x plus 6 and x plus 6, so we're going to get the same answer in both of them. And then what can go in there to make that 0? Negative 6 can. So negative 6 is our answer. For this one, we have to do b over 2 squared. We missed a z here. Our b value is 26, or negative 26. So negative 26 divided by 2 squared. So negative 26 divided by 2 is going to give us negative 13, and negative 13 squared is 169. So we're going to have z squared minus 26z plus 169. Then we're going to do the square roots of the first and the last. It's not an x. I'm trying to write an x there. Z, and then 13 and 13. And then 2 times 1 of the front times 1 of the back gives us the middle. So this one would be z, and this is a subtraction here, so minus 13 squared. And what goes in there to make it 0? That would be 13. All right. Here are the steps for solving by completing the square. So actually in the last 2 examples, I went a step farther and actually solved them. So number 1 is we have to write the equation in x squared plus bx equals c. So if there's a constant, we have to move it to the side by itself. Then we have to find b over 2 squared. Then we add that number to both sides, just like we did above. Then we factor, and then we take the square roots of both sides. So here, we want to move that 26 over. So I'm going to subtract 26 from both sides. So I'm going to have x squared minus 10x equals, and then 8 minus 26, 6 would be negative 18. Now I have to do b over 2 squared. b is negative 10 here. So negative 10 over 2 squared would be negative 5 squared, which would be 25. So we have x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals negative 18 plus 25. And when I do negative 18 plus 25, I get 7. So now I have to factor this. It's a perfect square trinomial. So x and 5 and 5. This one's a subtraction one, so it's going to be x minus 5 squared equals 7. So now, to solve this, because it's equal to 7, we have to take the square root of both sides to cancel out that squared. So I have x minus 5 equals positive and negative square root of 7. So remember, when you take the square root of something, you have two answers. So I have to break this down into two problems. I have x minus 5 equals the square root of 7, and I have x minus 5 equals the negative square root of 7. So this one, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And remember, we put that number in the front. So 5 plus square root of 7. And then for this one, we're going to add 5. And we're going to put that 5 in the front minus the square root of 7. So this answer is 5 plus or minus square root of 7 because they're the same except for that sign in the middle. And that's how we leave it. We're not going to take the square root of 7 and have to round it. That's our exact answer. All right, for this one, we're going to have to add 1 to both sides. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x equals 1. Then we're going to find b over 2 squared. B is negative 2. So negative 2 divided by 2 squared is going to give us negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x plus 1. And then 1 plus 1 is going to equal 2 on that side. So perfect square trinomial here. It's a subtraction one, so I have x minus 1 squared equals 2. And then I have to take the square root, and we're going to have x minus 1 equals the positive and negative square root of 2. So we break it into two problems. And we're going to have to add 1 to both sides. So we're going to have 1 plus the square root of 2. And we're going to have 1 minus the square root of 2. So again, I can combine those two answers and write 1 plus or minus the square root of 2. All right. For this one, Jenny's rectangular garden has an area of 2,816 square feet. The length of the garden is 20 feet longer than the width. Using the formula for area of a rectangle, find the dimensions of her garden. So I know that a rectangle is length times width. So they tell us the length is 20 feet longer than the width. So if I make the width x, the length would have to be x plus 20. And they tell us the area is 2,816. So now what I have to do is I have to solve for x. So I'm going to distribute this x. So x times x is x squared, and then I have plus 20x equals 2,816. Now I have to find b over 2 squared. So 20 over 2 would be 10. 10 squared is 100. So we're going to add 100 to both sides. Then we're going to factor. This is x and x. This is 10 and 10. And this is addition. So we have x plus 10 squared equals 2916. Then we have to take the square root of both sides. So we're going to be left with x plus 10 equals positive and negative 54. So two equations, x plus 10 equals positive 54 and x plus 10 equals negative 54. So we're going to subtract 10 here. This would leave us with x equals 44. And we're going to subtract 10 here. That would leave us with x equals negative 64. So because it doesn't make sense to have a negative distance, 64, that negative 64 is not going to work out here. So our x was actually standing for the width. So the width is 44, and the length is 20 feet longer than that. So the length would be a positive 64.